Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Nahmadu wa nusalli ala Rasulil Kareem. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, we praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ask Him send peace and blessings on His beloved, our beloved Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So we're reading, started the chapter of Salat, and we're reading now the shurut, or the prerequisites of Salat, things that you need to do before Salat. So if we read Tahara. Tahara is not a prerequisite. You sustain it in during the prayers, purification, but it's something that you need to do before Salat, wudu, etc. Similarly, also, we were in the chapter of read the Qibla. The Qibla is something that you check before you commence the Salat. So it's a shart of Salat. You maintain it throughout Salat, but it's something you have to do before the prayers. It's not technically like actually part of the Salat, directly the part of the prayer itself. So where we're up to, we're a continuation of Qibla. So the chapter on that the Qibla, the obligation of Qibla is omitted for the person who's fearful or the person who's traveling when it comes to nafil prayers, non-obligatory prayers, non-compulsory prayers, nawafil. Imam Malik narrated with his chain of narration that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam he used to pray on his ride when he was traveling wherever that he went. So obviously, if you're sitting in your transport, in this case, of course, it would be a camel. As a camel is riding along the track, then obviously it will be facing wherever it's going on the road. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to pray while he was sitting on his camel. This, of course, is referring to the nafil prayers. For fard prayers, he used to get down from the camel. Imam Malik narrated with his chain of narration that Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu said, if there was fear, severe fear, and the fear is tense. What's the fear that's been talking about? Generally, when it's talking about fear, it's talking about war and battle. So that a person cannot, you have to pray the 5 times salat. War doesn't omit prayers. Then how do you pray? So, and sometimes you have to face the enemy. Your Qibla is that way, the enemy is that way. You turn your back, and the whole army turns their back in concentration. No, you have to obviously still face the enemy. So if the fear is such, of course, there's a method for Salatul Khawf, which is a specific salat, the way to pray in battlefield, right? That half the army face the enemy, half prays. Even in that condition, salat is not excused, let alone our officers or school or work or whatever. Like, we have very little excuses to present, like my manager's anger is not the, like if you're facing enemy, and there, the Prophet ﷺ and Sahaba, they prayed. So it shows you how important it is. So there is a way, but in case it's so bad, the situation is so dire, that if a person was to turn away, then they may pray in that condition facing the enemy. Those who are on their feet, the infantry, the people they're walking, they don't have a ride, they pray standing upon their feet, because they'll pray as much as they can. Because maybe even certain situation, even if you go for sajda, then you might not, like if you're on the ground, like it's maybe a risk to the Muslims. So those type of risks are not to be taken. So they're excused to pray in whatever, as much as they can. And those who are riding facing the Qibla, or even if they don't face the Qibla, they sit on their riding animal. And upon this is the majority of the scholars of Islam. The virtue of praying in Masjid Haram. Masjid Haram is where the Kaaba is. Masjid Makkah Mukarramah, the Qibla is there, the Kaaba is there, and the Masjid of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Zayd bin Rabah and Ubaydullah ibn Abi Abdullah have narrated from Abdullah al-Aghar, who narrated from Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the salat in my masjid is better than 1,000 times more rewarding, that is, than any other masjid except for Masjid al-Haram. Masjid al-Haram is the Makkah one. Masjid Nabawi is the Prophet's Masjid in Medina. Malik narrated, meaning each salat there is worth 1,000 salats. Imam Malik narrated from Khubayb bin Abdurrahman, who narrated from Hafs bin Asim, who narrated from Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, or he narrated from Abu Sayyid al-Khudri radiallahu anhu, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that what is between my house, my home, min bayti wa minbari rawd min riyad al-jannah, that ma bayna bayti wa minbari rawd min al-jannah, what is between my house and my pulpit, where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam pulpit, the minbar, where Rasulullah used to go give khutbah from, address the people from. So between my house and my minbar is a garden from the gardens of paradise, either in that it was a garden in that time, or that this is because of how much rahmah would have descended there. I mean, just think about that. And the specific location mentioned, that we know this is related to who? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Min bayti, right? So from my house to my mimbar, right? So the common thing between the 2 points. So I point left and right because you're trying to put yourself in Masjid Nabawi. So we know the pulpits, like, you know, my left here, where the pulpit, and we know that where we give salam to Rasulullah, that's the house of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the house of Aisha radiallahu anha, where Rasulullah passed away. It's roughly about this distance, you know. Yeah. So I sort of just try to imagine that between the mimbar and the house, just imagine the curtain area there. That's the house. So between that, it's a very small distance. Those who have been there will know that it's a very small distance. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, how did they mark it? How did they show it? Ya Masjid Nabawi. How do you know where you're in the
white carpet?
White carpet? Green carpet. Green carpet. Alhamdulillah. Yeah. We're trying to replicate it here, but it's green carpet. So in that space where Rasulullah used to walk every day, it's one of the places where maybe Rasulullah walked the most back and forth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the amount of what amal were done there, and the presence of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, mainly the amount of rahmah, mercy that would have descended. So why is it a garden? What's a garden? Garden is where there's a lot of water and there's plants growing. So I was reading one of the commentaries, and that's the resemblance. A garden is where there's a water, and because of the water there's growth, right? And here, what's descending in this garden is the rahmat of Allah. Is the mercy of Allah is showering down on this place. So those who enter it, those who are in it, is it because the amal were done at that time, and does it continue? Of course it does. This is till Qiyamah. There is a view that's some people, you know, like, it's a view, it's an interpretation, but it's not the mainstream interpretation. Those places that were blessed once, they're always blessed. You know, this is like those places where Rasulullah set foot, those places that Rasulullah touched, those things from him, the athar on Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the art. We don't worship those things, but to say, then there's a view that once Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and most scholars believe this is an incorrect view, that Rasulullah passed away, those things are now cut off. They don't mean anything. But this is not the mainstream view of Muslims. This is not the scholarships that those things are blessed. They were blessed, and they are continue to be blessed. So it's just only. But the rawda we cannot go wrong on. We can, maybe the things that have been passed around, like the hair of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, sometimes they're very hard to know whether they're actually from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Like trying to establish it with certainty. But the rawda we can't go wrong on. That spot we know that this is where Rasulullah, and he's vouched for it in authentic hadith that is a garden from the gardens of paradise. So is it, and then it's a garden from the gardens of Jannah. So is this just to make it resemblance to the gardens of paradise? Is it tashbih, just for like similitude, like it's like the gardens of paradise? Or is it really that is a garden like Hajar Aswad, that this would be for Qiyam, this will be lifted and it's a part of Jannah actually? And most views that it is part of Jannah, this will be lifted and we made part of. Then I'll read the explanation, Shah Waliullah, in a moment. وَمِنْبَرِ عَلَى الْحَوْضِ, and my pulpit, not my pulpit, the pulpit is a hadith of Rasulullah, the pulpit of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the member of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is ala hawdi, upon my hawd, upon the pond. On the day of judgment, every prophet will have his pond. Rasulullah hawd Kawthar, the pond of Kawthar. So that out of ikram, that as Rasulullah is given, he has an honored place in this world, then he's given an honored position on the day of judgment. From that he will make dua for people, from that he will call people. It mentions then the next hadith, Malik narrated from Abdullah bin Abu Bakr. There's a commentary I'll read in a moment for this, from Shah Waliullah. Abdullah bin Abu Bakr who narrated from Abbad bin Tamim, who narrated from Abdullah bin Zayd al-Mazini, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that what is between my house and my mimbar is a garden from the gardens of paradise. Another narration that corroborates the previous one. I say, Shah Waliullah said, that the meaning of this hadith is that salat in this spot and dhikr in it, that will help a person to a garden from the gardens of paradise. Will get him to achieve that. And this is what they say, that the ulama say that once you pray, because once you enter the garden once, those who enter the Jannah once, they'll never leave. So in a way, you enter this garden and you'll never. Iqbal, he said that, that Jannah is nice. Jannah is nice, but it's not Medina. But in Medina there's a Jannah. This Rawda is referring to. That there is a piece of Jannah is in Madinah Munawwarra. And whoever ومن لزم العبادة عند المنبر يسقى من الحوض. He'll be whoever prays in the minbar, the pulpit of Rasulullah, then he will be given drink from the hawd on the day of judgment. So, and it is also said that the meaning of this is that between the minbar and the house is a garden from the gardens. This is the boundary of the garden from the garden. Like this is actually a piece of the qita, like a boundary from a piece of the paradise, as I mentioned earlier. The next chapter, do not set out on a journey except for 3 masajid. لا تشد رحال إلا إلى 3 المساجد. Malik narrated from Yazid bin Abdullah bin Hadan, narrated from Muhammad bin Ibrahim al-Haris al-Taymi, who narrated from Abu Salamata bin Abdurrahman, who narrated from Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, that he said, I met al-Busra bin Abi Busra al-Ghafari, and I said, where are you coming from? He said, from Tur, Mount Tur, right? He goes, yes, Sinai, yeah, Tur Sinai, so Egypt, right? So he's gone there to this special place. He said, if you had met me before this, you wouldn't have gone out. I heard Rasulullah ﷺ saying, don't set out on a journey except for 3. Don't go out and travel. Don't travel except for 3. Except for 3 masajid. To Masjid Haram, right? To the Masjid Haram, Kaaba, Masjidi, my masjid, this masjid of mine, and Masjid Iliya or Bayt al-Maqdis, which is the same. He wasn't sure, he couldn't remember. When they said, or is this or this, Iliya is another name for, Iliya is Jerusalem, Bayt al-Maqdis is Bayt al-Maqdis. These both different names for Jerusalem. And he wasn't sure which one, but they both mean the same thing. He didn't know which word, he couldn't remember what word Rasulullah used. So what is it called again? Iliya. Yeah, so these are both names for Jerusalem, meaning Masjid al-Aqsa, referring, what's the masjid in Jerusalem? Is Masjid al-Aqsa. So I said, it is from this that we know that it is not permissible to travel other than it. Out of qurba wa takhsis al-makan manhiya, like out of the holiness of the place, of the spot. Right? Out of the, there's only these places you can travel out of the holiness of the place. And he goes, and the reason, Shah Waliullah says, maybe the hikmah is that as the people of Jahiliyyah they used to do, they used to invent new holy places all the time. They used to make their own holy places. So, and with their own opinion. And there's a long discussion on this and debate on this between some, but this is specifically for, some say this is restricted specifically for masjids, right? That if you're going to travel, meaning pack your bags and buy a ticket to travel, then you should only be going for 3 masjids, because all other masjids are basically equal in relation to each other. Yes, if there's 2 masjids and like one's a bit further, and you go for the bigger jama'ah there because you want to get more reward, right? So you travel a little bit. You're not going for the holiness of the building or that place. It doesn't have status in Sharia because of the location. Like the masjid in Faulkner is more holy than one in Doncaster. I mean, give you an example. If anybody from Faulkner or from Heidelberg or some other place. But the jama'ah, you might go, so I want to pray in the bigger jama'ah tonight. Then you go for the size of the jama'ah, which is more rewarding, right? So, in the sense that the masjid, they're all equal, but these 3 masajid, they have specific fadila, right? Does this extend to other things? There's an argument. Does it extend to people that want to go to like the graves of awliya? This argument's been used. This hadith has been used for that argument. One group will say that no, you can't apply this only for masjids. But then if you look at this incident of Tur, they're not going for the grave of some pious person or something like that. They're going, so they say that's a different reason. Wallahu alam. I mean, if the ones who believe that, there's a argument and so forth, debate. But definitely the vast majority of scholars have the view that as that person was blessed in his life, he's blessed in his death as well. And there is a special to that. But you're not going there for a masjid or to pray in a specific spot there. Wallahu alam. The virtue of sitting in the masjid and waiting for the salat and walking towards it. Malik narrated from Abu Zinad, from A'raj, from Abu Hurairah, that Rasulullah ﷺ said that indeed the malaika, they pray forgiveness for you as long as you are sitting in the place of the prayer. As long as you don't do hadith. and they keep making this, Allahumma ghfir lahu, Allahumma arhamhu, Allah forgive him, Allah have mercy upon him. Yahya said that Imam Malik said, I don't understand from hadith here except for al-ihdas alladhi yunqad al-wudu, that event or that thing which breaks the wudu, meaning passing wind or bleeding or something. So he can, as long as he doesn't pass wind, because what's the other interpretation can we give for hadith? Tahdith, speaking. Like hadith could be, but hadith here goes, because you can make, what does it actually mean? What's the event here talking about? The thing that can happen, the occurrence that can happen, is it breaking wudu? So as long as he doesn't break his wudu, he's sitting in a state of wudu after salat, waiting for the next salat, he's being rewarded as he's in salat, and the angels are making dua for him, and this is that Allah forgive him, have mercy upon him. Imam Malik narrated from Zinad, who narrated from Arij, who narrated from Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that as long as you continue to be in salat, and he stay there, and nothing kept you there except for the next salat. Right? Because you could be waiting there, someone's got to give you money, I'll meet you after salat. Now you're just waiting till the next salat, not for the salat, you're waiting that guy arrives. So there's another reason why you're waiting for. So your only thing that kept you there is waiting for this, to get these rewards, to be in ibadah, worship, doing dhikr and so forth. Imam Malik narrated from Ala bin Abdul Rahman ibn Yaqub, narrated from his father, narrated from Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, shall I not tell you with that which will wipe out your sins, that will lift up raise your ranks? That is, so these are the things that will wipe out sins and raise the ranks of the person, the reward person. Isbaghul wudu and makari, to be thorough in wudu when you don't want to, like it's difficult to do wudu. Maybe it's cold water, right? Maybe it's hard to do wudu, whatever. But a person does wudu regardless, like he stays in wudu or makes wudu. Second thing is that wipes out sins and raises the ranks of a person. Kasratu khuta ila masajid. A lot of footsteps to the masjid, like going regularly, and if you live further away, walk further back and forth to the masjid. Third one is waiting for a salat after another salat, one salat. So from one salat to the next, person sits and waits. So we have to do a'mal anyway, like we have to do a'mal, like we have to do tilawah, the dhikr and so forth. So at the moment, it's only an hour and a half between Maghrib and Isha as an example, because other salats may be a bit hard. There's like 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, but that's probably at least we can try to bring this in our life. I think Maghrib and Isha, it's a logical time, probably the only time we could probably, if you're not doing this already, then that's probably the only time we can probably try to do some a'mal between one salat to the next salat, where we can just put all our a'mal we're supposed to do, or reading, or whatever we have to do, try to practice on this. Even if it's once a week we start off with, we need all of these, we need all the reward we can get. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said about this last point, فَذَلِكُمُ رِبَاطُ فَذَلِكُمُ رِبَاطُ فَذَلِكُمُ رِبَاطُ. That is ribat. Ribat is, generally the word ribat is for what? Protecting the Islamic frontiers, right? So it's usually comes under the chapter of jihad, and it has its own chapter. So basically, the Islamic frontiers to be there to block the inroads into the Muslim lands. So before, borders was not so defined as we have them today. Like there wasn't nation states. So there were city states, and then there's frontiers. There's like a grey between like empires and so forth. They had like an area in between, and they're not exactly clear-cut defined, right? And there was constantly incursions into each side. There's like a constant back and forth and moving of borders. So then it required people to go there. So praying salat, waiting salat, to be particular by salat, right? This is rabat. This is protecting the Islamic frontiers. If you go to Masjid al-Aqsa, you'll see there's people there, the murabitun. Murabitun are the people who do rabat, right? Murabitun, in today's terms, like how does that work? What they have is to make sure there's, from all over Palestine, there's always people there constantly, Masjid al-Aqsa. Like there's a constant, they come from different parts and they spend time there, stay there, men and women, to make sure that this is it's not neglected as it was once, sadly, in the past. May Allah make it easy for them and reward them, because they're doing like a service on behalf of the Ummah. And like sometimes when we go there, like I was speaking to somebody about this, about going to Palestine. Sometimes we're going through. I had had an experience of going through borders, and like it's not nice compared to like here. Like even most like sort of Western countries you go through, there it's a very hostile thing. Someone said it's not as bad as Egypt, but so, I don't know. I don't. And like because of that, you're sort of turned off. Because why should I put myself, especially us raised in Australia, like we have very thin skin. So if they're aggressive with you at the airport or something like that, but a friend was saying like, no, he goes, that's not the reason to stop. Like I said, I've been there, ticked it off. I'm not going to go again. I never wanted to put myself through that again. And not that I'm going to do anything, but it's just like it's sort of like there's a pain there, you know, like because at least you can come back home. They got to continue living there, and you see certain things. And he said, yeah, but that's why you have to go again. Like you cannot be this sort of like a person who can turn away and like you know, like it's you cannot just we're not doing, you know, like I was telling the kids in year 8, I was teaching Islamic studies. So in Islamic studies books are the history. Abbasis, Banu Umayyah, Abbas, Khulafa Rashidin, Osmaniya, Salajiqa, Seljuks, and you know, and then it comes to the last page. It's a picture of a plane landing in a Western country and everyone in suits coming from their home, like brown people coming. I said, that's our page. There's like the Ottomans and these empires that Muslims had. And then last page is like these brown people like getting off the plane. They're arriving in. It was a book is written in England, and I said that's that's us. And I said one of the kids in the maktab. I said, okay, there's a little kid with a suit, you know. I said, because that's you coming from India, you know, like. But that's our history, you know. Like, you know, hopefully there's something after that's better. But I think like we have to get over ourselves, and I think we are very sensitive maybe in the West, and we have to sort of just all right, like that's all right. What's going to happen for 2 hours, 3 hours, 6 hours, 12 hours, 10 hours? I'm going to be annoyed, you know, like it's going to be hassle, right? There's their life. It's like an everyday experience. They live through all these problems, and it's in their face all the time. So I think we just have to bite the bullet and say no. We're going to keep connection to Masjid Al-Aqsa. We're going to go there regardless of what happens at checkpoints and borders and hassles. No, this is the least that we can do if we shouldn't avoid it. I'm saying this not for you, for myself. For ذلك مربات والله أعلم. لا يخرج, a person should not go out from the masjid after adhan is called, except that he intends to return. So adhan is done at 7 o'clock. Isha in our masjid at the moment, Isha is at 7:30. Iqamah is like a half-hour gap almost, or 20-minute gap. So like a person, let's say living, he goes to the masjid, but he's going to come back. That's fine. But if you're not going to come back, then it's severe warning. Sa'id ibn Musayyib said that none of you should leave the masjid after adhan, except that he intends to return to it, else he's a munafiq, he's a hypocrite. Only a hypocrite will hear the call of prayer and then turn, you know, in that time, there was only one type of people who didn't pray in the time of Rasulullah. He's a tabi'i, right? So he's with Sahaba, he's the most senior tabi'i, right? He's Sa'id ibn Musayyib. In that time, there was only one type of person who didn't pray in the mosque, an open munafiq. Like everybody knew he was a munafiq. Like the secret munafiqs, they still prayed in the mosque. And for them, that was like he's a hypocrite. He's a pretender to Islam. And Shah Waliullah says, upon this are the people of knowledge. And in Hidayah, which is a Hanafi fiqh book of Imam Marghinani, said that whoever enters a masjid and the adhan is given in it, it is makruh, disliked, not haram, but disliked, that he leave it until he prays in it. Or if there's some arrangement made for Jama'ah elsewhere or something like that, you know, like some other thing is there's a reason for him not to be there, but under normal circumstances, it's makruh to leave the masjid. I think that's enough for tonight, inshallah. I had a few, 4 or 5 chapters, a section about women in the masjid, praying in the masjid, and inshallah, I'll leave it till next week. Barakallahu feekum. Subhanallah bihamdi, subhanakallah bihamdika, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun, wa salamun ala al-mursalin, walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Any questions?